Hi, everything is still on mute from my end.
How about now? Oh,
Unmute that.
that's no good.
Yes, now I can hear.
I'll try again.
Okay, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, so one, all of the things that I was saying before, were those all muted? Outstanding.
Yes.
Outstanding. So what I was saying before, and this is the mayor's chair, but since the meeting started, what I was saying before that we were going through the swearing in, and so that left us a little behind on schedule. So our apologies to that. I was trying to kind of just keep people informed of what was happening, but apparently being muted, I wasn't keeping anyone informed. Thank you for letting us know, but that was the case. At this point, we have opened the meeting, had the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think that it is the mayor's meeting to run. So I will be quiet at this point. I think we were just looking to see if Valerie had made it on.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. It's always an honor.
I'm not the president.
Thank you, Mr. Doran. As always, it's a pleasure to take over the seat for the few brief moments that I have it. At this time, well, first I'd like to congratulate the new council members, and then we'll move into the business. I would be accepting nominations for president of the council at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I would nominate Jade Warren for president of Churchill Borough Council.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Diane. Any discussion? Seeing that there's none,
I believe this, it says a roll call.
It would be a roll call vote. Yes.
okay.
Ready? Deb Cassini Klein. Diane Law,
Yes.
Matt Castilla,
Yes.
Valerie Renthaler,
Yes.
Brooke Burchett Williams, and Adam McDowell.
Yes.
Of course, I imagine you're okay with it.
Probably not, but thank you all. I appreciate your trust in this moment. That being the case, I would nominate Diane Law as for vice president.
Second.
Any discussion? So moved. Need to take a voice vote.
Yes. Again, yeah, it would be a roll call vote again.
Roll call.
Matt Castilla,
Yes.
Adam McDowell,
Yes.
Valerie Renthaler,
Yes.
Brooke Burchett Williams, Deb Cassini Klein, President Jay Doran,
Yes,
and Diane Law.
Yes.
congratulations. Welcome back to the party. Keeps going for all that's worth. Thank you all for your trust in us and in the leadership team. Again, we have a lot of work in front of us without any doubt. Looking at the reorg meeting, and I know that we have new council people, so I kind of want to walk through kind of where we are in the process, kind of what's going on. The order got a little bit out of order in that we were on the timeline of the judge in order to get the swearing in done. And so we have gone through the process of the swearing in of the oath of office. We have gone through now, as you know, the reorg votes themselves. And so that brings us now in the space of the reorg to the public comment. Reorg has public comment too. And as a result, in this space, if you would like to comment, you will have 3 minutes. Please raise your hand. I think many people are familiar with the process, but just to be clear for everyone, as you're looking at the screen, you can click on the participants. This will give you the option of raising hand. I think we're still on that one, right? Or no, this is the webinar, so that you can raise your hand. We'll call you, promote you, and move you forward. We're on the webinar format. My apologies. That being the case right now, it appears we have 1 hand raised for public comment. Are there more that were promoted, Alex?
I just promoted Sandy.
All right, so Sandy, Flex, you are up first, it looks like. Sandy, if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. My name is Sandy Fox and I reside with my husband at 38 Holland Road. I want to express my anger at the 5 council members who voted to approve the conditional use permit on December 21st, 21, including former member Kevin Collins. I also want to thank council members Adam McDowell and former member Norma Greco for considering whether the applicant met the criteria for the conditional use permit and voting no. I read the Churchill Borough Resolution 4533 approving the Churchill Creek Project conditional use application and approving the findings of fact and conclusions of law in support of the decision. There is much that angers me about this approval, but given time constraints, we'll focus on the following right now. While the testimony of objectors is derided in the document, there is no mention of the testimony of expert witness Dr. Deborah Gentile, who was called to testify by Dr. Ruthie Ray, a Churchill resident, and herself a pro se party objector. Dr. Gentile testified on the adverse health effects about their outdoor air pollution and is medical director at Community Partners in Asthma Care. Her qualifications listed on page 4 of her PowerPoint presentation are too numerous to mention now, but include over 60 peer-reviewed research papers and extensive experience in allergy and asthma clinical research with continuous grant funding from NIH, EPA, and foundations. She has conducted 10 years of research on asthma prevalence and exposure to environmental triggers in underserved children, and half of her study sample in her most recent research were students in Woodland Hills School District. Why no mention of her testimony and the findings of fact on the impact of diesel emissions on health? Also, while Council Member Diane Law lamented the limits of what she could do, she did not heed the results of the landmark Harvard study reported by me in my testimony that found that fine particulate matter below the standard deemed acceptable currently by the EPA causes premature death. While I am not a physician nor a scientist, I am capable of citing the results of peer-reviewed studies regarding harmful impacts of diesel emissions, and the references were listed for any council member to read. Furthermore, the credibility of the traffic impact study, which was the basis for other reports by the developer, including that of air quality, was highly questionable. Under cross-examination, the traffic engineer, Chris Prisk, stated that 25 trucks would be entering and exiting every hour, sometimes less and sometimes more, and later agreed with Mark McDonald that 1 truck would be entering the site about every 2 minutes. Yet Hillwood's findings of fact and conclusions of law stated a figure of 13 trucks an hour, 1 every 4.5 minutes, which you adopted as true. There was no mention in your approval of findings of fact and conclusions of law of this and other discrepancies in the traffic report. Your decision defies reason and raises concern about what led you to approve this application.
As you know, I try to keep to the 3 minutes, but I do appreciate your comments. I understand that they're heartfelt. And they're certainly being heard. Thank you. Next, we're going to move to Kathy Bordner.
Okay, my name's Kathy Bordner and I live at 1926 Hampstead Drive, and I agree with the statements made by Sandy Fox. I found it odd that the 2 people who spoke about being against or supporting Hillwood's proposal did not cite anything about the ordinance, Jay Dwarn and I think Diane Law did not say anything about what's in the ordinance, or Kevin Collins, and the 2 people who voted against it did cite the ordinance, Adam McDowell and Norma Greco. So I think that was very telling. I want to mention something else. I've been advocating for something to be done at the intersection of Beulah Road and Lewin Lane. I spoke at this at past meetings, and during the Christmas holidays, during 1 week of the Christmas holidays, there were 3 accidents at that intersection where wreckers hauled off vehicles and people were taken away in ambulances. And I want the public who are attending, watching this meeting to know that there are, that I've sent emails to the council. Alex and I were going to try to talk today. We didn't get to, but I have requested that a council member be appointed to address this issue. I want this raised to PennDOT. I want them to seek input from the community, and I want something done about this situation. This intersection is dangerous. It's been discussed on Nextdoor. I'm not the only person who worries about it. And if anybody watching this would like to know, to get updates about whether or not the council does anything, whether anybody actually does speak to me about it, they can email me. My email address is with the C, Kathy, CATHY .Bordner, B as in boy, ORD as in David, NER @gmail.com. And I'll be happy to add you to an email list to get updates about this. I'm looking forward to hearing from someone on the council about it, and so that we can move forward and get something done about this dangerous intersection. I think it's very sad that 3 accidents occurred, which means that at least 6 people and the others in their vehicles were impacted by this. And I've been raising this issue for a year at meetings, and nobody has ever, contacted me about it. And Hillwood left it out of their traffic impact study, which was inexcusable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. And I will say quickly, because outside of the confines of the current year, it's been brought up in the past multiple times, because I live on Garrick Drive, and I can tell you right now that I turn onto that every single day. So I recognize the concern that you have, and it's something that's been brought up. One of the things to recognize for us is it's not our road. And so the times that we have brought it up to Jay Costa and others in previous kind of councils, we've run into that problem. But I certainly will refer it over to infrastructure in terms of committee-wise, because I think that's the proper place. But it's something that I know some of the roadblocks that we'll run into. So that being said, I just wanted to kind of put that out there. Moving forward, who's next on the line? April, the floor is yours.
Hi, Jay. It's April Klein, 18 Holland Road. First of all, I want to congratulate both Debbie and Brooke on their election to council. They ran a well-run campaign, and we look forward to your leadership in the year ahead. I'm a little bit disappointed that the swearing-in wasn't public on the Zoom venue. I looked at the agenda for both meetings tonight on the borough website for the reorganization and for the workshop, and both agendas had time for public comment. And by denying us the ability to see the swearing in, not only did we not get a chance to witness this historic event, but public wasn't allowed to comment during that event. So I'm just curious as to why that was private and not public. I want to thank both Adam and Norma for their careful review of all the testimony, both from the applicant and from our residents during the 14 public hearings. And I'm very grateful that both Adam and Norma had the courage and the integrity to look at the testimony and to vote their conscience, because like them, many of us don't believe all the conditional use criteria were met. And I'm sure there was pressure on both of them, and I really respect their careful review of all the data. So I hope our new members actually listen to our residents the same way that Adam and Norma did. And I wish them success and luck as they help lead our borough through all the interesting times we have ahead in 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you, April. Appreciate your comments as always. And I do think there was a bit of technical difficulty in lining up with the judge, and it did become a bit difficult to manage. So my apologies in that space, and I'll take the hit for that. Moving forward, who's next on the list? Is anybody left? So I believe then that actually takes us through public comments. If we're looking at our action items, one of the things of the magic of the reorg is that we have to get everybody appointed back in the positions that they're supposed to be back in, which is lots of perfunctory voting in some cases, in other cases, kind of important spaces. So we've got a list that we're going to go through here in terms of the people that are looking for positions. And so I will leave it to the floor for folks to start moving us through this. We need individual nominations, Mr. Solicitor, or
I was just going to say, I believe with this, unless there's anyone that objects to any of these individuals or appointments, you can do them all as one vote for all the individuals that are on the list.
thank you.
So the only one that is the vacancy board, you don't have a member for that. But other than that, the
Right,
name,
but there's not a question of objection to that. It's just, it's not there.
Right.
you would
There's no
need a
one there.
body, you would need to make an appointment to fulfill that position. Currently, the vacancy board, theoretically, if it had to function, would be the members of council
Right.
and an additional member. Typically, you'll see communities use a past member, for example, of council, but you don't have a name for that yet.
But for the purposes of tonight,
What I'm saying is you can't do a slate without a name.
so,
So you just need to remove that
right. We understand.
unless you have a name.
So it does not, basically, the point being that the nomination does not include the vacancy board. That's the point.
Right. You can make the motion and explain that, all the individuals listed other than the vacancy board.
Understood. Looking to entertain a motion as said.
Then I move that we remove the position of vacancy board from the appointees this evening.
And are you asking to nominate all others?
Yes, and I did, but we need to.
No,
And I move to approve all of the remaining people for all the different positions in the borough.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Matt, the Zoom game is throwing me off on your seconds. Discussion for the purposes, before we begin discussion, just so people kind of understand what this is, because I think a lot of times as we go through this, especially if you're like new to the seat, it's like what's happening. And so when we come in for the reorganization, there are a bunch of positions that have to be appointed back to space. If there's an objection to one of those, then you can object at this time, and then we would either pull it off and have further discussion. So the positions, the manager secretary, which is Alex, who has been here, will get, hopefully continues to be here. But if there's objection to any of these positions, please do not feel that you need to hesitate. The assistant secretary, finance, you'll see the repetition of the same names quite a bit, because that's our paid staff do like 30 things. And so they're listed as multiple spaces in the jobs that they do here. So you see Krista as the assistant secretary, as well as the finance officer. We've got Ralph Zatlin, who quite frankly, our space would never operate without him. But he sits as both the kind of public service, our solicitor. It goes by the firm, not the individual. And so the firm that we're using is Tucker Arnsberg. We've used them for several years. They've been quite helpful. Our engineering has been Gateway Engineers. And Gateway, we have kept a close eye, quite frankly, on what we pay them, because engineers can go off the rails sometimes in terms of the cost. But they've been outstanding for us, and really, it's been a really kind of challenging time. Not just the development space, but beyond that. People don't realize, it's not just that we have this big development, so we have pipes that are crumbling, and so they've really been helpful in our space as far as that goes. Again, you see Krista as treasurer. Then we have to have an assistant treasurer, which is Patricia Gamrat. Something about her husband, I don't know who that guy is. Then again, we have as right to know, when people make right to know requests, that's under Alex's responsibility, along with the zoning officer. The fire marshal, again, goes back to Ralph. Every time you hear that siren go off, please know that Ralph is out there with volunteers. And then the emergency management coordinator, Scott Stonebreaker. So these are the positions that are we have to have done in order to operate. And so unless there is, and it's fine if there is, by the way, I don't discourage conversation, but unless there is a objection, we normally go through those. Now, if there's a discussion that you'd like, something you'd like to bring up, a concern, questions, now is the time also for that as well, even if it's not an objection, just to make sure we have the opportunity.
Mr. President, I would like to open up a discussion regarding the appointment of Alex Grazzani to the zoning officer. I think that it's imperative that we do a job of being council members and rallying our community members to fill vacancies on boards and commissions. And so for that reason, I will be voting no on appointing him to zoning officer. I think that a resident and homeowner should be appointed to that position because that dictates and impacts our livelihood.
And for a bit, I think, of clarification too, there is the zoning kind of committee space in which we actually appoint folks in terms of residents, we make recommendations, and then the zoning officer, but duly noted and understood. I would say that in terms of operationally, it makes sense to have some staff in that space, but I understand your concern. I would point to the zoning board as the space in which we want citizens who really do the review of stuff that comes in and make recommendations in terms of on policy or on actual zoning ordinances. But the duly noted and understood. That being the case, then one of the things that I would say is we probably need to amend the current motion, because the current motion is them as a group, right? And so I would need an amendment to remove the zoning officer, and we'll have that as a separate vote, and then leave the remaining ones in so that we're able to vote for those, if that's acceptable to council.
Excuse me, Mr.
Correct.
President.
Correct.
Yes, Matt, go ahead, Matt.
Just while we're still in discussion, would it be possible to put that list on the screen so that everyone can see that? Do we have that?
Other discussion? Brooke, if you want to make the motion to remove the zoning officer from the slate, and then we'll have a separate vote on the zoning officer.
Mr. President, I make a motion to remove the appointment of the zoning officer identified as Alexander Grazzani from the action items. And I request that we move that to a separate action item.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the issue? I would just say that when there's a question or concern, I support the idea of bringing it out. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. Just to point that in that space. That being the case, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I only have 2 in favor.
Aye.
If you're in favor of pulling it out, you'd be voting
Oh,
aye.
aye, sorry, aye.
Thank you.
Yes.
I get it. It's first meeting, so
Yes.
don't, I don't want your own thing to go down on your own vote.
Aye.
So cool, we've got 4. All opposed?
No.
Nay.
No.
The ayes have it. And so at that point, we'll pull that out as a separate motion. The remaining motion stays on the floor. No, there were 4. The remaining motion stays on the floor. Let's do it as 2 separate ones. And so is there any other discussion on the current motion of the remaining slate? Hearing none, it is a roll call.
Matt Castillo,
Aye.
Deb Cassini Klein.
Aye.
Brooke Burchett Williams,
Aye.
Adam McDowell,
Aye.
Valerie Renthaler,
Aye.
Diane Law,
Aye.
Jay Doran.
Aye. All right, that slate carries and moves forward. That brings us then, I would entertain a motion to appoint Alex Graziani as the zoning officer.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Good.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this one?
Readdress my comment.
Yes.
Okay, so my comments are regarding this appointment. I think that it's imperative that we have members of the Churchill Borough serve in capacity of being zoning officers or serving on boards and commissions, because we are homeowners here. And it is very important that we are involved, and we are involved in the capacity to make decisions that will impact our lives and the lives of our family members and our children. And so for that reason, I'm not in favor of appointing, although he is an excellent borough manager, appointing him to zoning officer when I believe that position can be filled by the current president.
Duly noted. Again, I think in restating position, the issue of the zoning board, I think, is where we have our residents, and that's actually where they vote and make the impact on zoning itself. We do need somebody to kind of shepherd forward. That has always been a kind of full-time staff, which is how we've operated. I understand your concern. I certainly wouldn't want it voiced. But from my position, I would disagree in that space. I will turn it to others. Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, this again is a roll call.
Adam McDowell,
Aye.
Matt Castillo,
Aye.
Deb Cassini Klein,
Aye.
Valerie Rentaler,
Aye.
Brooke Burchett Williams, Diane Law,
Aye.
Jay Doran.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving forward on this, we have the designation of the newspaper. So as for folks, again, we have to have a kind of newspaper record. We have traditionally used the Valley Mirror. I will reserve any comment until discussion, but that has been our traditional space. At this time, I'd entertain a motion on designated newspaper. Anyone? We do need to designate newspaper, as it turns out.
Mr. President, I move to designate the Valley Mirror as our legal newspaper.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I would just open discussion in this space. For many years, there's been conversation about moving to a larger paper. Why don't we use the Post Gazette, like those kind of things, which on the one hand used to make a lot of sense to me. I would just point out to folks that legal notifications now, in a lot of the kind of formal spaces that we're using, people don't really look in the same way on the newspaper that they used to years ago. And so to me at this point, I see no problem with maintaining the Mirror. It's local, it's small, it kind of gives us our space. But there has been, and for the understanding of new folks particularly, there has been prior discussion about using a larger paper. So I would just put that out so you guys know that as well. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then we go roll call.
You don't need that for this one.
Oh, we don't. Great. I love it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and we get to designate our newspaper. Moving on to our bank. This is the question of where we're going to keep our funds. We currently have accounts with PNC, just for understanding. And so I will turn it over for any nomination.
Mr. President, I move that we designate the Borough Depository as PNC Bank.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Thank you, Mr. Castiglia. I appreciate you both. Any discussion on the matter? Where the funds are now. So, all right. That being the case, hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it is designated. All right, at this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the reorg meeting so we can head into the workshop.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moving on to the workshop. We will call the workshop to order at 7:51. Again, this is a roll call to start our meeting.
Deb Cassini Klein.
Here.
Matt Castillo,
Here.
Adam McDowell,
Here.
Valerie Rentaler,
Here.
Brooke Burchett Williams,
Here.
Diane Law,
Here.
and President Jay Doran,
I'm here.
and the mayor.
Here.
right, so nobody ran away. So, that's a good start for the new year. So, once again, even though we just had it for the reorg, we do continue to have public comment for each meeting, and this is a separate meeting. And as such, we make available public comment once again. So that being the case, if there are individuals who would like to make public comment, again, if you can state your name, you have up to 3 minutes, your address, and we'll call it. So if you want to raise your hand, if you're interested, we will do that. We will promote you over and allow you to make public comment. Does not look like we have any public comment that wants to go back to back. I could appreciate that knowing up. I take that back. We have one to be promoted, Alex. Here we go. So let's move them. So Brandon Bailey is first. So promote as panelist. After Brandon will be Sandy Fox.
Yes, my name is Brandon Burchett. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, just wanted to say, so first and foremost, my address is 5600 Ogontz Avenue. But first and foremost, I just wanted to say congratulations to Brooke Burchett Williams for, of course, now being a member of the council. She's going to be a great addition to you guys' team. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the changes that she will help you guys implement.
Outstanding. You can't see the smile underneath my mask, which is unfair. Outstanding. Any other comments?
That's all. Thank you.
Absolutely. Congratulations,
I did-
Brooke, and
I didn't
for
catch the street address.
the comments itself.
I just didn't catch the street address for the meeting.
Where
notes.
does he live?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we didn't catch your address, but I'm gonna let it go anyway.
Yeah, I'm not currently a resident of Pittsburgh,
I know.
PA at the moment.
I know, I got it on the name. I let it roll. So for the purposes of saying congratulations, I was willing to. I took personal privilege on that, so y'all can get on me later. But I get it. Okay, moving on. We have Sandy Fox is up next.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read an email that I sent to Jay and Diane earlier today. I haven't gotten a response yet, but I thought I'd read it to everyone. I understand that both of you are or have been on the Council Management and Government Committee. I hope that you are able to answer the following questions I have regarding this committee. 1, when was this committee formed? 2, who was on the committee in 2019, 2020, and 2021? 3, who headed the committee between 2019 and present? 4, how often has this committee met from 2019 to present? 5, are there minutes of the committee meetings, both internal and external, including with any other elected officials or governing bodies/agencies? 6, if so, how can I access those minutes? 7, if no minutes, are there notes from those meetings? 8, if no minutes nor notes, can you help me understand why that is? 9, finally, who has the committee met with outside of Churchill Borough from 2019 to the present? And I do think in terms of transparency, it's very important that residents know what goes on in these committees. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments as always. Is there any other comments on the table today? I believe then that clears us through another round of public comments. We're going to move on then, unless I'm missing anything else. Did I miss anyone? Always try to make sure. We have a few discussion items in the space of workshop. So for the purposes of this, the workshop, unlike the business meeting, is much more kind of discussion based. There's generally not a lot of voting that we do during workshop. It's a little different this time because we have the reorg, which caused some kind of mandatory voting. But generally, workshop is a space in which we kind of have discussion, work out kind of what we got going on in preparation to the next week's vote. It gives us time to kind of digest it, if there's materials or things we're going to look at. The other thing in workshop as we move forward, and I think we'll talk about this as the month goes on, is the space in which we really look to take whatever new issues are there and put them in the proper committees. So that committees have the time and the ability to kind of digest these things and bring back recommendations to council as a whole. So having said all that, we generally start, the minutes are provided. I don't know if anybody had any questions on the minutes. They're pretty basic normally, unless there's something that clearly is problematic. It's pretty simple in that space. And I'm going to roll through this, and please, particularly, I'm going through all this. I normally don't go through this much detail, but please feel free to stop me in the middle. If I'm saying something like, hey, I didn't get to look at that, or I don't know what you're talking about, don't worry about it. This is the space of kind of, learning it and figuring it all out. So you'll see we've got the minutes in this space. We normally have 2, but with special meetings, we get to have more than 2, which makes it all the more fun to read through. And then we also have generally kind of reports and other information that comes out. On the workshop, we don't normally have the mayor's report necessarily by the time workshop is there. So we get it at a later point because it comes both from the police chief and then the mayor kind of reviews and it comes to us. But if there's something in particular that pops up, if there's an issue that was going on, he'll bring it up during that time so that we can have a discussion about it. Or if there's something that we're concerned about that we want to talk to the mayor about, we bring it up at the same time. I don't know if there's anything pressing.
Nothing pressing right now. We're waiting for the chief's report.
Yep, that's what I figured. I mean, that's generally how it functions, so that you guys know. The mayor has oversight over the police department in terms of operationally. The police committee has policy. So he'll give us kind of what's going on. Here's the number of calls, here's the number of issues that have gone on. And then if there's something that stands out to us or something that we want to know more about, then we have that conversation with him. Same thing on the treasury space. The finance committee generally is in contact with the treasury. The manager pretty much leads most of the workshop anyway, because he knows what's going on the day-to-day more than we do. It turns out, we are volunteers in this space, and he's getting paid for putting in the hours. And he can really give us a lot of kind of the information on, hey, there's something to worry about, if there's an issue that popped up, to let us know in that space. Same thing that the manager will generally get the information from Ralph on both issues of kind of infrastructure that go to infrastructure committee, but also on issues of the fire department. And we get a kind of an update if there's something that's serious. The engineer, normally we give some space at the end of meetings to kind of tell us the bad news of what's happening in our borough. Because unfortunately, infrastructure is, as Matt will tell you, is that of the infrastructure committee, an ongoing, never-ending process that connects engineers. So that is where that is. Same in Vigliotti, which is our contract for our roads, our plowing in the winter, because it's an idea there. Woodland Hills EMS, we normally don't have too much from. Generally, the real thing is the funding level that we're providing to them. That's also true of the library. Then we have the Penn Joint Water Authority, which we do have some committees that folks will go, or some appointments that folks will attend, and sometimes have updates on fees in particular. The MS4, the situation that we're in the consent decree continues to affect us in terms of fees and structures on our infrastructure in that space. For folks who've been here, I know I'm kind of going through each one individually, but I think it's to everyone's benefit. That being the case, then we have the discussion on committee structure and the committees that we have. So people, and I don't know if there's anything new to kind of discuss in this space on this. We have it further on. There really wasn't any kind of reports that were coming on at us, so I don't think there's much to discuss. But normally at that space, number 4 is where if people are providing reports, and we're going to talk a little bit when we get into that on how committee structure will go moving forward. But this is where we get kind of committee updates or report updates. Normally, as we move forward, I'll just say this: if you're getting your reports, then I wouldn't ask that people have to speak on them. It's, do you have questions about them? If you're not getting reports, then it's something that we need people to speak on. Did something happen? What's going on in that space? Is there something we need to know? That takes us to that. That takes us to number 5. So number 5.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, You said there were, I have a report on the trees.
Ken, how can I ever forget about you? I am folks, both here and at home. I am forever apologizing to Ken. As both the tree committee, it is his space, and I should not overlook it. And I again, as you couldn't see my smile before, now you can't see my look of disgust at myself. So yes, Ken, the floor is yours in terms of our tree, please.
Okay, no, thank you very much. This time I knew how to get my hand up in time before you got to number 5 or number 6.
No, it's on me. It's on me. It's on me.
We're good. And first of all, let me also welcome the 2 new council members, Ms. Williams and Ms. Klein. I'm Ken Balke. I live on Hampstead Drive in the Churchill, in the Royal Oak plan of the borough. And I've had the honor and privilege of serving as the chair of the tree committee since June of 2018 or 2019, when we enacted a tree ordinance that prevents people from just cutting trees down along, particularly on the right of way, and really making an effort to make sure our tree canopy has been declining at a pretty rapid rate. So have other communities too, but ours seems to be running actually faster than others. And so we have 3 efforts underway. We have an active tree planting effort underway with the Woodland Hills School District. And we've actually done planting at the high school here just recently. We've been coordinating also with Buell Presbyterian Church, who has a very active tree planting effort. And in the major one, several of us are going to meet again with the Allegheny Land Trust, doing with the Churchill Valley Greenaway. There's great interest in, there's parts they want to keep as meadows and other parts they want to actually repopulate with trees, and we'll be willing to coordinate with them. For the new council members, we did submit a pretty comprehensive or a summary report last month to go into the newsletter, but it was to be shared also with the council members because by the ordinance, we're required to provide a quarterly report to the Borough Council each 3 months. So the one just went in. So we have a lot of good things going on, but the one question I have for the council members is I couldn't tell through your appointments. We have 3 members on the committee now, and we had a request in to have Natalie Boydston also added to the tree committee at this time. There was a letter submitted. This individual is incredibly talented to help us. And one of the steps we want to do is inventory the trees, and we have a better handle on the state of the trees and getting to trees before they die. They get to the residents, they get them to take action to prevent the tree from dying, particularly along the street trees. And Natalie brings some tremendous experience, will be able to help us with that. So I may finish my comment, and then you can answer relative to Natalie's appointment. Did it occur this evening, or is it occurring next week, or is it done in some other session? Okay, I'm real anxious to get her on, because as soon as we have her, we want to have a meeting. We were going to meet in person, but I think we're going to just use Zoom. I've been teaching a class at Pitt doing it, so it'd be no issue to set it up. But I do have a very serious concern I want to bring. I was exercising late this afternoon to the new council members. Our tree committee submitted a report 6 months ago of 3 properties where there's dead trees along the streets, and they need to be removed. I'd like to have seen them all moved, but there's one tree in particular. It's a pin oak tree actually at the end of my street. It's 70 feet tall, has 6 branches overhanging the street. I think one of the branches, when I looked at it tonight, it has to be at least half a ton. If any one of these branches comes down, it'll kill somebody underneath, even if they're in a car, it'll crush the car. And the longer this tree's been dead for almost a year now, and I'm really becoming quite concerned. And for the new council members, I'm an engineer. And my whole job is in the safety area, and my effort is to prevent things from happening. And I'm really asking the house where the tree is, the people removed 5 dead evergreens that were part of the request, but they've left this large pin oak. And each day going by here is really making me quite nervous. The tree's starting to lean out over the street. And it really, a lot of people walk underneath it routinely, including families with children in strollers and whatever. So it's an accident waiting to happen. And I know it could be tied up with legal issues or whatever, but those legal issues would be trivial to be somebody that would get hurt or killed by one of these limbs coming down from this tree. So I'm really, I know it's Alex and Ralph has gone by it many times, but I don't know what action it takes here. But it can't come soon enough to get that tree out of there before it really causes some serious harm. Thank you.
Ken, can I ask you? Oops. It's gone. The street it's on?
Hello,
Ken, she was asking what street it's on.
Hampstead.
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 Yep.
And there's a written report with figures that were submitted in July the borough office knows the address.
Yes.
And they've been watching, I'm just saying, I don't know how it's tied up, but I'm very concerned, and from my own experience, dealing with something that goes wrong will be 100 times worse than trying to deal with what we have right now.
Sure. Mr. Mayor.
Ken, to your comments about the trees, I also had jotted down on my list to discuss tonight at the workshop. You're talking about the dead trees up there on the cemetery property.
Yes.
Those trees along Lewin Lane there. Again, today I saw a nice big chunk of tree laying down on the ground. There's probably 3 or 4 trees in that one particular area that need to come down.
Yes.
And I talked to Ralph, a while ago about where we stood with that situation. He said that we've already sent them a letter, and I believe a second letter was sent to them to do something with those trees. So I don't know where it's going to go from there, but definitely those trees are big pine trees, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And I just happened to see a woman the other day walking a baby along that stretch. So God forbid one of those trees come down. I think we really, need to jump on the cemetery. I guess it's the due process. You have so much time, you got to inform. But, when does that end and we get some action?
And kind of to that point, I think there's a couple things to take into consideration. One, the last time we discussed this, one of the things that I have not heard back from Senator Costa's office on that issue, because you may recall a few years ago, I had probably 5 years now, maybe 6. I'd received funding to cut down, we had received funding to cut down some trees through Senator Costa's office for this exact point. Here we are again, so that's been put out there, but I haven't put back. So on the borough's end of trying to do that. The other part of this, though, as kind of the mayor is alluding to, is that we do run into this process, this challenging space of what's ours and what isn't ours, right? And even with the liability of it, God forbid something should happen, right? It's still a situation where we don't necessarily always have the right to come in and say, hey, you have to do this, you have to spend this money, you have to take care of this, you have to. We sometimes find ourselves limited in those spaces. So not to all of them, to your point, Ken, but to some of them.
And if you go to our ordinance, the ordinance says if it needs immediate action, the borough can take the action and you'll address it with that owner rather than sitting and waiting. I'm at a point where over the last few weeks, we've had storms come in with some really high winds. And if you have somebody driving underneath, the one tree in particular, the one I mentioned, is one of really deep concern to me, just because of the size of it. And it's half a dozen limbs that are massive right over the road that'll just crush a car. And and in that case, the homeowner doesn't live in the house. They live in another state. And right now, I don't think there's anybody in the house, which actually probably a good thing.
Yeah, that probably in that space is probably to our advantage.
But our tree ordinance gives the borough the right to do it. It just comes down to covering the expense. I'm at a point where if you need me to collect the money, I'll collect money to get this thing out. If somebody gets hurt, I won't live with myself. if somebody gets hurt with this one, because it's gone too long without having something
I'm gonna
done.
turn to the solicitor and see where we are in that space, because the other part of this is what our ability really is, irrespective of language.
If you want, I can give an update.
Yeah, so Alex has an update as he is gonna look.
So as
into
Mayor
this.
mentioned, there's due process, and whether it's tall grass or other kinds of zoning violations of the code, we notify the residents and they have a time frame to address it. And if they don't address it after those timeframes in due process, we can begin a proceeding to take action on our own. And we would lien the property. This one, we're working with a contractor to remove the tree, and it will eventually lien the property. But everybody has rights, and part of the property right is due process to take action on their own before we initiate action. The cemetery, it's a little different. I was told by the cemetery that it was and is an acceptable practice to use trees as grave markers, and that's what those are. And I, in writing, acknowledge that. And if any of the descendants of the deceased had an issue with that, I would be willing to state as a public safety concern, I understood that, but I was still directing the cemetery to deal with the safety issue. And I would, on my own, went ahead and did that because of these issues.
Sure.
I have witnessed what it's like when a tree falls on a house. It's not a good thing. It's very agonizing when a property owner suffers that kind of damage, and in this case, loss of life. So I do take this serious. This is not being ignored, but people have rights. And we just can't come in there and do what we want when we want it. We have to let the process play out.
So, and I don't think there's a question about that the borough would want to infringe upon due process. And I don't think there's a question about whether or not the borough would ignore an issue. So I think what we're hearing is that we have run through the due process, particularly on that tree that you're speaking to, Ken.
Yeah.
That we have moved forward with the process, right? That we have addressed it in the way that we're able to, and that, quite frankly, that the tree will be addressed and a lien will be done if that's how this ends. And so, thank you, Alex, for that on a number of levels, and on to the point of the cemetery. I did not know, by the way, that trees in that sense get used as grave markers. That's a really interesting point. One that kind of, okay, right? And yet the safety issue comes, and we're not trying to hurt anybody else. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the comments. Was there anything else, Ken, that we needed to add?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for clarifying the situation.
Thank you as always. I appreciate.
Excuse me, Mr. President.
Yes.
Just before we finish this discussion on this, David, did you have anything additional to add, or did Alex cover everything?
Yes, Alex did cover it. Yeah, Alex
Thank
did
you.
cover it, and there are notice procedures in the ordinance that he alluded to. That's right.
We are good there, but I appreciate the comment. The other thing, though, that Ken, you did bring up was about the appointment, and just kind of as a quick space. The next page on item 12, we have kind of this list for discussion, and then I would believe that next week we would address the actual appointment itself. I have not heard any reason or any objection or any problem or any difficulty in that space.
Okay.
And quite frankly, while we're just in the kind of space of the tree committee, if to new members and existing members, like if you heard, one of the things that Ken was talking about is cataloging all of the trees. That's some pretty outstanding stuff. So, I don't see any, I wouldn't foresee, and this is just me speaking, any real issue there, but just so you know, next week would be the time of the appointments. Just to put that out there. Now, I think we're going to move on to number 5, which is discussing the accepting resignation of Krista Watt. I don't even want to go through this as our borough finance officer and treasurer, so let me, is this a discussion point? I will take a point of personal privilege and kind of open, because I haven't had a chance. I was supposed to talk to you today. I haven't had a chance to talk to you yet because my day has been hellish. But I wholly object to this entire thing. I totally get it. But I still think it's or Krista is just invaluable to us. And, I understand that there is an opportunity and one that has come up. But we still in talks, so I can figure this out with you. So I will I don't really have words. So Alex, anything you want to?
Well, I echo that, and Krista knows how I feel. She's been invaluable. Truly, the day she got here, it was as if she came with 20 years of experience and hit the ground running, and the energy of 10 people, and the heart to match. In local government, one thing matters to me, and that's how much you care about people, because we're in the people serving business, and quite frankly, how much you love caring about people. And nobody cares more than Krista does. She has a heart of gold, and every citizen, every request, every realtor, every builder, every objector was treated to her as if they were the most important person in that day that she was meeting with. And I can't say enough about that. That's a quality that you just can't duplicate or clone, though I wish I could. So I would rather she not leave. And if you could reject her resignation, it would be wonderful. But she's willing to stay with us through mid-February, which is critical because we have to act quickly to replace her and hopefully have time, if it indeed works out this way, that she can train and overlap a little bit with the new hire.
Yeah. That's my follow-up deep comment. Yeah. Folks, just to clarify something. Krista is someone who's implementing systems for us, not just ideas. And the change with Alex and Krista. I mean, you guys, we had a different. I love our old, our old borough manager. She was great. I love our old assistant manager, I mean, Donna and Sandy in that group. But Krista and Alex have taken us forward from kind of a system that was built in 1990s, and I'm probably being a bit generous, and really kind of pushed us in every way to be more effective. And then COVID hit. We're trying, they're doing this on the fly. This Zoom thing that people have been like, oh, well, it's not working here. So we built this on the fly. Him and Krista just did this as, how can we get our public in, here? So, this is a real loss to the citizens of Churchill, to the borough, to council. And I can't say enough. So I still get at least one more shot at this. That's the way I see it. I know you don't think, but I got a plan, Krista. I got a plan. So we're I'm good at this. I'm good at this. But outside of that, that's my only other comment. If other folks have comments, and then we'll move forward.
I want to echo what President Doran said, but on top of that, I think that it's really important for the public to understand when Alex and Krista dropped into this situation. We had lost both of our main staff members in the office. The COVID pandemic had hit. We had to interview Alex, and he in turn interview Krista remotely. The way that they dropped into this situation and not only kept things together, but as Jay said, moved our systems forward in a way, the technology, the communication systems, all of that they managed to do in the midst of this. So I'm just dazzled by Krista and her skills and what she brought to the table technically. If you look at our current budget document, which is available on the website, you could not find a more thorough and professional piece of work. And so I'm deeply grateful and also supportive of a person who deserves to move into a position that she thinks is going to be better in her life and in her profession. And as much as I hate doing it, I will support her need to move on.
Okay. If not any other comments, we will we'll move forward on that next week as a formal acceptance. Again, can't say how much we really do appreciate Krista.
Can we say no?
So I believe we can. I don't know that she'll care, but I believe we can.
Of course, I'm only kidding and just adding my own.
I'm not.
my
I'm
own
totally
piece
not.
too. Well, she will dearly be missed, and certainly appreciate all the hard work, like everyone else has said. You know, can understand and certainly support that desire to move on to bigger and better things, I suppose, but will definitely be missed.
All right, which does bring us to making sure that the borough manager is able to advertise for replacement. As you heard from the borough manager, the point being obviously to give the opportunity that we're not scrambling, that Krista has time to work with somebody, that we have kind of a smoother transfer. And of course, you know, I know I've talked to some of you, but I'll just bring this up so people know. You know, the ability for the borough manager to find the right person that works with the borough manager. We set policy, he sets daily operation. And so I think it's really important that he's able to find the right person that works for him. He did a fantastic, obviously, from us job in Krista, and I think that you know, he'll retain that ability and do a fantastic job again. We're here to help. We're here to support. We understand the challenges in front of us, but you know, I don't see any issue with kind of moving this forward. Questions, concerns about kind of moving forward on space?
I just want to be sure that he's in a position to do that immediately, that he's in a position to move forward immediately because of what's sticking. Do we need to take, and our solicitor can tell us, do we have to take action on the request in order for you to move forward?
You're welcome to. Make a
No?
motion to do.
Okay,
Yeah.
but that's my only concern.
If you'd like to, you can.
So the question, Diane, is
The question was, do we have to take action to, you know, because we want to move this as quickly as possible, obviously.
no, I mean,
We can move forward without accepting
right.
resignation.
The manager can take action to advertise and bring someone forward to you for approval. He doesn't need authorization from you tonight to do that. But, you know, of course you can discuss it further, but you know, the approval point would be when he actually brings a person. This is, you know, who I want to hire in this role, would be when approval would be needed.
Okay, thank you.
So no worry there, but I think next week we'll take the formal action, but unless.
Well, I think what David's saying, you will approve the hiring.
Yes.
Like, for example, but we want to advertise tomorrow. We want to get it all out.
You can do whatever you need to do.
So we can
right.
get candidates to review,
Absolutely.
and I'll be working through you all to see what those
Yep.
candidates are, you know, just,
I think,
we don't want to lose time.
I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
You know, the directive is there, the authority is there, you can move forward. Okay, so we've got the occupancy permit ordinance. So where we're going here, because I think as we talk to committee, I think it's.
So this is something we've worked on for a little bit in updating processes, and we need to tighten up our ordinance, and we've worked with Gavin's firm, who's been reappointed tonight. David's representing it with a gentleman named Weston, one of the colleagues at the firm, to develop a draft ordinance. It is in the binder. I did for the first time give you the binder and portfolio format, which I understand was a little challenging. So I'll make sure tomorrow you get the binder by itself, but council, you always get as well the individual files. But we're reviewing that draft. What will happen if the draft is satisfactory, we will need permission to advertise because it's a code, which will mean it wouldn't be adopted next week. It would be the earliest February that it could be adopted. So, you know, when we talk about transparency in local government, we try early and often to get these things out. And this is just really your first chance at hearing this. Some of you have heard this in committee and have heard it at different levels as you've seen us pull our hair out related to occupancy permit issues. So we'll be there for you to review. Eventually we'll need permission to advertise. Eventually you'll be voting on a final draft.
Discussion on occupancy.
And I should be clear, this is about, not a lot on new construction, but it is about transferring of properties and rentals. So anytime an occupant leaves and a new occupant comes, there's a safety inspection that we make. And this is just making sure that's a nice, tight process.
Yeah, we do not have a nice tight process as it stands.
Correct.
Just for clarity for everyone. So the importance of this, and this has been discussed several times in the last session. So I think unless there's reason for concern, we should be kind of on a track on this one. Should be in the
Mr.
packet,
President?
the ability to review. Yes.
Just for discussion on this, Alex, would it be possible for the next binder to have both the proposed and then I guess whatever our existing is, kind of so we can look at them together?
Of course, I'll work with you on that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on that matter? Okay, then we've got some discussion on going through our CCTV, some of our general agreements. Anything of
So just
note? I
real
mean,
quickly,
it's the
and I'll
same-
put that
it's
share
the
back
same.
up. I'm sorry, I didn't keep
It's
that up
okay.
very long. So in the past, we've advertised these.
Yep.
And these were advertised for 3 years, but each year would have a renewal option. And let me just get that back up here as I apologize for that.
So that everybody knows, when I
It's
first
fine.
came on
I'm
council and I looked at this, I completely thought that was like some kind of like TV, like
Yeah.
cable TV or something. Just so you know. Yeah, it's the camera in the sewers, absolutely.
Almost-
I was
Right.
not as in depth when I showed
Yeah.
up to council. I was like, so what is this? What do we do with the cable TV stuff?
I'm not sure why it's, there we go. I have to show all my screens. I apologize for that.
That's okay.
It got put to the bottom.
There
So
you
there's
go.
3 different things. We did spell that out for for anyone else who knows who wonders what this is. This is basically filming the sanitary sewer pipes to see if they're compromised or clogged and to get a sense of how they're performing. Of course, the excavation deals primarily with sanitary and storm sewer lines, but there may be other things. And we have a contract figure for that. And that particularly is on an as-needed basis that we get a number, but it may not be as much of that. It may be more depending on how many hours we need
Yep.
them. And then the third one deals with the manhole to manhole lining. Similarly, we don't know exactly how much work we'll do in a year, but we try to guesstimate how much we'll need to do to line and to take care of those compromised sewer lines. As you can see, some of these are 2 years and one's a 3rd year. They've all been properly advertised. And in your binder for next week, I know Dennis is working on a memo to explain in greater detail their bid prices and what was in the budget for those items this year. So you'll have those to compare. And what we'll need for the council is just to renew those agreements with those 3 different entities. Dennis, did I cover that or do you have more to add?
Yeah, just the one point that I would add is that these 3 contracts do help fulfill your consent order requirements that specifically include your operation and maintenance of your sewer system. So your operation and maintenance plan. And the borough has been a little bit more proactive with their storm sewer repairs as well over the years, as we have had some flooding. So ties into both of those. So each one of these kind of function. CCTV is normally identifying the issue, and then either excavation or lining are then the way that we rehabilitate our system that is 70+ years old in most cases. So that's why we do perform this on a yearly basis. You're required to televise all of your system once every 10 years, or we break it up 10% per year, and then repair if necessary.
You appreciate the explanation. It hasn't, turns out the camera work has not changed since the first time when I thought it was cable TV. Yeah, now you got to see what's down there, then you got to fix what's down there is the bottom line to it. And I think as those of you who will be privy to work in the infrastructure committee will find out so quickly. Yeah, there's a lot down there.
Just to add a further point, we did discuss this in the infrastructure committee, and one of the things that we discussed was whether it could make sense to re-advertise. Certainly I think those were all low bid at the time, and we'd expect with labor rates going up, et cetera, if we were to re-advertise, our price would actually probably go up quite a bit. So that'll be spelled out in more detail by Dennis as we talked about.
Good point. Good point. Thank you for the comment. Unless there's further, that moves us on to number 9, which is discussion of appointing a new deputy tax collector. The tax collector recommends Carol Donahue, who is the tax collector of Chalfont. So, I'll ask if there's any discussion of this.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Diane.
No, I understand that this individual is not a resident of Churchill. And I don't know if we would be able to identify someone from Churchill, but I'm not entirely comfortable with this.
If I could, David has done a lot of research on this subject. David, we have the right guy tonight when it comes to questions on tax collector, huh? We learned a lot over the last 18 months with the resignation of Dan, the appointment of Danielle, the appointment of Keystone, and so forth. Dave, can you explain, or can you help address Ms. Law's question about residency and the prerogative of the tax collector, if I understand correctly, to appoint their own deputy? Or
Right,
recommend
so,
appointment?
and the first thing to remember about this is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the deputy that is being appointed here is just to serve in the case of incapacity of the elected tax collector. So if Miss Weaver were sick or just left the position or wasn't able to do it, that's when this deputy tax collector would come into play. It's not someone who would actually be typically collecting the taxes on a month-to-month basis. This would only come into play if there was an issue with the elected tax collector, where she couldn't do the job. So, and then in terms of having a non-resident, that is allowed. It is allowed to have the tax collector from Chalfont be the deputy tax collector in this situation, as a deputy. There's nothing that I did look at that issue, and there's nothing that says you can't do that. So
I'm sorry, can you clarify on the space of the prerogative for the tax collector?
Yeah, typically an elected tax collector has a prerogative to recommend the appointment, which they are in this case.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. So yeah, the tax collector has the ability to, as you said, appoint the deputy that she would want. The borough then has to approve whoever the tax collector selects. So we have an approval power there too.
Right. And so if the question was one in which the council member or more than one, but it's just the concept of her concern, the council member had a concern over the question of residency and preferred to have someone as a resident. Right. And I'm not necessarily weighing in one way or another, simply saying that if that was the will of council, then they would have the ability to reject any non-resident.
That's correct.
Understood. Just to kind of put that to the space. So, I leave it to the other members. Your feeling on a kind of non-Churchill tax collector from another borough being our deputy, for your discussion.
Well, I guess my question would be, can we have a conversation with the tax collector presenting our concern, asking her for an additional nomination? If she can identify someone else who is a resident who meets the criteria, and then we vet both and weigh the experience and make a decision from there. Is that possible? Was that clear?
So to restate, and correct me if anything I'm saying is incorrect, to contact the tax collector, let them know that we have concern regarding the non-resident status, for them to identify a resident that they would like or prefer as deputy tax collector, still then giving the tax collector the ability to select someone, but putting it in the space of a resident, and then allow their response.
Correct.
Yeah, there's nothing that stops you guys from having that conversation. Absolutely.
I would support that.
I would support that. I think that's a good idea. I mean, what do we know about Carol?
I don't know much. Let me say that.
Although sometimes you can't find someone better.
Right.
You
Also
know,
true.
in the perfect world, I agree with you. It'd be good to have someone who lives here, but we may not have that ability.
So I am going to say, so let me stop for 1 second and say, why don't we table this for a moment? And I'll say, and when we finish this meeting, I'm going to suggest that we have a very brief executive session pertaining to legal matters. And then we can continue this conversation.
Certainly.
Because there is a particular kind of litigation space that's also involved that I think we should probably have like a conversation on. But
Mr. President,
yes.
so sorry, finish your thought.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just before we close discussion, I guess one thought that I had is, certainly I think having a resident, I do like that idea. However, understanding that this is a position that requires, certain training, et cetera, having someone else that's already a tax collector, that could be a benefit if it were to come up that our tax collector was incapacitated. So that might just be something we should all think about while we kind of work through this space.
And I think that's a good point. I think there's a plus and minus in that space too, being that she is actually busy on another borough's tax collection. Then you've got an overlap. But I see both points. But I'm going to suggest that because the point of this is to notify her, to try and find someone potential. Then, as Brooke said, we could weigh the Churchill resident versus the initial. So we'd be able to take your point into account as well, Matt. I think Brooke's point is well taken. And it gives us a space to kind of move forward with it. But before we do that, let's table it so that we can speak about it in exec, not that part, but the other legal matter, so that we can brief the rest of council, and then we can move forward with that. So thank you, and thanks for both suggestions are solid. This moves us into the discussion of the council kind of. So we start. Yeah, it's a little scratch, if you will. So my apologies, as such me, I'm doing like 18 things at once. So I end up sending you the draft instead of the original. I totally get it. Now you see what it looked like when I typed the first time. Please don't read it. Having said that, so the question really is looking at it in the anticipation of continuing the same team. I wanted to put it out there so that people had a chance to digest it, to look at it. If there were serious concerns or questions that you had or thoughts that you had, I wanted to kind of bring it up so we can have that discussion on the committee assignments now. And I can tell you kind of, the general reasoning behind it, and then we can move forward. So I will stop talking. Folks have thoughts, process on committee assignments.
I have no comment about committee assignments. I looked it over. I think that it was.
I like when I get it right. Yeah, with help from everybody else by talking to all you guys makes it a little easier. I don't get it anymore.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm doing my hand gesture to my screen.
Well, I had a comment.
Here comes the mayor. You ruined it all for me.
No, well, this is pretty simple. I noticed that the last time the committee was formed, I was on one of the committees.
You have the right, Mr. Mayor, to get any of the
Okay,
committees,
yeah.
quite frankly, that you want. The thing is, for folks to understand from the way that we operate, the mayor, I have no problem with the mayor being on any committee that the mayor has interest in. If people have a problem with it, then we can discuss it. But as council, right, we can only have 3 people on a committee, because once we get to 4, we run into sunshine and we have to advertise every meeting, and it's a different space. And now we have a quorum that could vote on things, and it's a different kind of discussion. Committees really serve in the capacity of doing the required research on the item that's brought before us, many times brought by the borough manager to council, put to the committee, and the committee comes back with a recommendation, right? So the way that we really should be operating, and this is something that we talked about trying to get together and talk about as a group, but just kind of give you the quick version of this, right? Is that issues come in, whether from an individual committee member because they talked to a resident or because something they saw, or they come in through the borough manager or through the chief or through the mayor. We then will have a discussion about it in a workshop space to say, hey, who should be looking at this? Who wants to take this issue on? That then goes out to the committee. The committee then will review the issue at hand. So if we were talking about an infrastructure issue, because I get a feeling we're going to talk about those a lot, to send those to infrastructure. You know, we would have the conversation. Somebody said, hey, I'm concerned on the way the road is laid out, right? That there's these accidents that are happening. We have a conversation. We say, okay, let's send that to the infrastructure committee. Infrastructure committee looks at it in conjunction with, quite frankly, the responsible staff, right? Because quite frankly, the staff are doing the heavy load in a lot of this. They're at the policy end. The staff are on the operational end. They'll come back with a recommendation to us saying, we've looked at this, here's what we think we can do, right? We think we can do the following. It's a state road, so there's limitations, blah, 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 blah. Then if there's an action item for all of council, something that we actually have to do as a council, we'll vote on it. If there's not an action item, then we just give our tacit authority for the borough manager to move forward, right? So example would be, we were talking about the trees, right? And I am going to talk about the trees a little bit more because they're going to fall into a committee space. But does somebody need to, do we need to have the government relations committee speak with Senator Costa's office to address potential funding, right? And that's something we can work with Alex on to see how that goes. And then we would give a report back saying, here's how it happens, right? So all of these committees and the way that they should function, it really should be us as a council saying, we want this committee to handle it. We want this committee to handle it. So we have agreement on which committee is doing it, right? And a lot of times these things will have crossover where it could go to, you know, one of three committees, right? So, you know, first one who puts their hand up, please, we'll send it to you. We don't care. But that will be the expectation moving forward. A couple other things I wanted to say about the committees though, because there are certain commissions and other other existing committees that will, we're council, we function in one space. And then there are like the recreation board, right? The recreation board needs kind of a committee for it to have relation and contact and liaison with. The Human Relation Commission needs to get up and stood up, right? So that needs, you know, both the council person to help stand it up, but also the appropriate committee that it should be under. The tree committee, which is a residential committee, right? It's the residents, right? They need to have a committee to report to, right? And then that committee, right, will tell council kind of, hey, here's what's happening in that. So that's where, for instance, the Climate Action Committee comes into play, because we have an environmental committee already, and we have the tree committee already, right? Both of those are spaces that can report to an action can happen through climate action. So the structure of this, I think, is one that if we do this right, will really help us kind of keep things moving. Will help us all know what's going on with each of the committees. But this is also something that we need to talk, I think, on that when we can find that Saturday, if that works. Did anybody else have any other? It's always me talking. I apologize.
Mr. President, I have a question. You just mentioned, so the Climate Action Council Committee, under that is environmental and tree?
Yeah, I think, I would think, again, it's for discussion. I would think that both would be under that. Is that too much?
No, I mean, we can discuss, but I was just wanting clarification.
Gotcha. I'm looking to Adam now when I say, is that too much?
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that that committee would have sort of jurisdiction over both environmental and tree and kind of liaise with those. So, yeah.
Please.
Yeah, I just want to mention that the tree committee evolved out of the zoning committee. But I think once we got that in place, once we got the ordinance in place, it makes perfect sense for me to now move that to, you know, the environmental committee. And so I think that zoning has enough other stuff. And I think that I like this all organized under that heading. If you don't mind, Adam.
So
I think it makes sense.
A bit of clarity too on this. I think when let me take a look here. One of the things that we were looking at was potentially is looking at the zoning space underneath the infrastructure space, right? So there'll be some shuffling, there'll be some moving around, but I think it's a way to kind of consolidate our, the ideas in the right spaces, and then as they come in, we can decide where they're going to go to. So great. I'm glad people are okay with that. Makes my life easier. This moves to number 12, which is we have a lot of spaces to get filled in here. So talk to me where we are, Alex. Help me out here.
So the positions that are enumerated have expired or recently expired, like 12/31/2021. Some of them were a little bit earlier than that, like the Recreation Board members. Sometimes board members are appointed until their positions are full, or filled by council. So for example, the Recreation Board might have had a couple meetings since a couple of their terms expired. So in your binder, in the packets, you'll have the names, for example, the Zoning Hearing Board member. Each of these existing positions, the people have been reached out to and have expressed an interest to be reappointed. In normal years where maybe COVID and Westinghouse redevelopment doesn't exist, the council might want to go and advertise for these positions and entertain the idea of interviewing for these positions and put a lot of sweat equity into vetting people and working that. You just didn't have that luxury last year. And so, again, if you're willing, next Monday, you'll be voting and reappointing people. For example, the Zoning Hearing Board, the name is in your packet. The Planning Commission, there's 1 member. Civil Service, 2 members. Rec Board, there's a little more. Tree Committee, this includes the new additional member that Ken has suggested. Since it was a new committee, just a little quick thing on that, as you can see, they're 3-year terms. So what ended up happening when you do that, one person gets a 1-year term, another person gets a 2-year term, and third person gets 3-year. So they're staggered. So that's such a new committee, you end up having 2 additional people. Human Relations has already been mentioned. We need to stand that committee up. The Pension Committee, you already have, it's a member of staff, a member of the police union, and then the third needs to be from council. So I have that with this group just because it is a formal position that we want to have in there. Kevin, of course, as you can imagine, was a person who served in that space. And then these other ones, either the staff or council person would be the primary and the other one would be the alternate for the Tri-Valley COG or the Turtle Creek Valley COG, the Land Bank, of course, I mentioned the Tax Collection Committee. So there's a number of those. And so a lot to think about in addition to the committee space that we've already covered in that previous agenda item.
And again, we'll try to appoint these as germane to our committees. That makes sense. But also, if you have an interest in something, even if it's not particularly in the committee that you've been assigned to, that there's an appointment for one of these that you're like, hey, I'd like to participate, please let us know. And we certainly will take that in consideration. Some of these have more activity than others. That's what I'll say. But if you have an interest, please let us know. We can try and make sure we have people in the right places at the right time. So,
Mr. President,
yes,
I know that David asked me, could she still serve as the bunny? I said, absolutely. So you got that.
listen.
And I can be on the rec board as well, right?
Yeah.
That's not a-
What happens with the rec board is you become the liaison to the rec board.
Right, which I
Not so
think
much
is
on the
a
board
good thing.
itself, right?
Okay,
And
Good.
so, and then you can kind of report to us kind of what's happening and how that's working.
oh, good, okay.
We've had a number of council people who have been rec board folks, council
Mm-hmm.
folks, or the other way around. And my daughter's counting on you.
Easter Bunny, okay,
So-
good.
so we'll put it-
I didn't think that was a conflict of interest, but I just want to make sure.
Well, you never know. Some of those bunnies.
It's
out there-
important, it's important.
Hey, it is important. Let me tell you something.
So some boards do preclude at least elected officials being the majority. The beauty of commissions and boards is you're having citizen participation. So you kind of want to
Right.
expand your reach. And we have a lot of discussions with the planning board this past year because Ms. Law is both on the planning commission and on council. Most places, though, you're more than happy to have that, but as I think Jay was saying, by being a liaison, you actually can pull another person
Right.
in and have more citizen participation.
And that's worked well for us in the past, in terms of our relationship with a lot of these kind of the citizen participation in committees. It's been a better space for us to have a council person as a liaison, because it's also helped, there's been a few times that quite frankly, I'm thinking about the rec committee and the, when they were doing the kind of the public day, the community day.
Oh, the community day.
And they had a
Yes.
great community day, right? You got a fantastic community.
It
day.
was fantastic.
And what wasn't there for council was the liaison from council saying, give them more money. Like, quite frankly, right? Like they did a fantastic job, and the rec committee actually asked for very little money. And they were doing such a good job in the ability to expand it. Let's talk about what we can expand and what we can't. And if it's a budgetary question, it brought our community together. It had a real kind of tangible benefit. And so, having a liaison to have that conversation will be great.
Oh,
It'll be
good.
really helpful.
I'm
So-
glad to hear that. That's great.
So I think that's a great thing.
So I have one quick question, Mr. President. I just would like to know, as far as advertising for the vacancies, what is the process? And
So no, you make a great point. It's been one that's been kind of around here for a long time, right? So we've advertised, we put on the website, we try to let people know. We've gone through a number of different tactics to try and get community participation. Quite frankly, it's really hard, right? The website has probably been, and kind of conversation has probably been the two most successful things. What I would say looking forward, right? If I was trying to think about, again, this is where the communication committee, I think, has a really great role, right? Because looking forward, I would look at probably more targeted kind of social media advertising to the future, because you're able to actually target very specifically.
Yes.
But that really hasn't been something that we've done up to this point. So it's been traditional advertising, it's been website, it's been word of mouth, right? It's produced situations, and this is true, this is not unique to Churchill, so this is kind of across the board, right? Volunteers are hard to come by. And so there's been many times that we have, I'll give you a great example, right? The Human Relations Commission, which I championed for years, right? Got it up and couldn't get anybody for a while. And then got one person, then got two more people. I mean, it's taken more effort than I thought it would take. So I think that sending the question of not what we've done in the past. So I think that's my answer to what we've done in the past. But there's a reason that we thought about creating a committee for communication, right? Is to address that and to look at how we can get better participation. So I think it's a good point, good question.
is it possible to, in the monthly advertisement of the agenda, put a space in there to identify vacancies?
Yeah,
So that way
I think
it's
it's
clear
yeah.
for members of the community to know what commissions and boards are vacant. And then they can go to the website to get information about what that role would look like.
I wouldn't see any issue with that. Just generally on the agenda to add whatever, if there's a need for new positions or committees. Generally, like this, it's listed. And I know that you've done that kind of in the past where you've listed kind of what's been available. But yeah, I don't see any issue. Is there any complication with that? Yeah. So yeah.
Just another comment to that too. Is there any way, I know that Quick Reach was to be used for specific activities in the borough. Could we use that as well?
So yes, again, I would refer that probably back to this. I would refer it back to committee at this point, as we're going to set the committee up. So part of under the committee is the issue of Swift Reach and Savvy Citizen and how we're reaching out to people, the website, and that's all within the committee. So I think that the points being brought up are really good points, but also that is exactly why we refer things to committee. And so that as that committee stands up, and now I get to look at Valerie at this one, so I get my squares. As that committee stands up, the chair and the committee members will be asked to provide some recommendations for us in the best way forward. No, please go ahead. Yes. every committee has a chair. Every committee is comprised of 3 members. Side note,
Excuse me, Jay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear Deb.
I'm sorry. She asked if every committee has a chair. And I was pointing out, hey, Deb, everyone, and Alex told me to remind you, and I failed at this part. So I'll say now, whenever you're speaking, make sure that you press the button so the green's on. When you're done, you can turn it off. And if it's blinking red, it needs new batteries, which Alex has conveniently taped for everyone right next to us.
Thank you,
I feel a little bit of that like flight attendant thing, where like if you look to your left, you'll find the 2 batteries. No worries at all. No worries at all. And thank you for letting us know that you couldn't hear. So I appreciate that also. Now I lost my train of thought on that. Yes, do all committees have chairs? So what I was saying was that not only do all committees have chairs, but in the past we've toyed with some other ideas to try and give people like some flexibility. Like what if we use 2 standing committee members and allow a 3rd person to come in? That was a miserable failure. Just so you know, it turned out to be just a mess. Because it didn't provide consistency that was necessary for the committee. So all committees are comprised of 3 members, 1 chair, and then 2 other members. The chair, the responsibilities of the chairs, as we'll talk about moving forward, is to arrange the meetings, make sure that the committee members know their roles and their purpose, and to address what items are coming in, and to ensure that reports come back out. But the voices are equal, right, in any committee. Just as the voices are equal here. And so, your voice is heard, and we'll have just as much input as anybody else.
So as a point of clarification for the inside outside baseball, item number 11, we were talking about borough committees, which are made up of the members of the council. Totally discretionary, isn't something required by the borough code, just something to help move borough activity without making these meetings too long. It's quite frankly is for efficiency's sake that you put things in committee.
It is solely for the purpose of our council to work effectively.
However, item number 12 are either state statutory enabled or borough
Right,
code enabled. So for example, the tree committee and human relations committee are established by the borough code of Churchill. But the planning commission is something that we're enabled to do by the legislature under the municipality's planning code, and its chair, for example, and how they're functioning, maybe in those codes, whether it's the borough code of Churchill or the borough code of the Commonwealth, or another separate state enabling legislation, which is germane to boroughs, townships, and cities. So we're kind of confusing. We're kind of using the terms interchangeably. I want to make sure whoever's following us knows we're talking about
we are,
boards,
but for the
commissions, committees, and
purposes,
councils.
I mean, part of the thing about the workshop space versus, let's say, the formal business meeting space, is it does become a kind of fluid space for us to have the conversations. Your point is well taken, Alex, and in fact, your point is really part of that kind of Saturday conversation to make sure that everybody has the kind of the clarity of each role. So I appreciate that. But I also just wanted to, as we're kind of moving our way through it, make sure that we understand kind of how we're going to operate kind of amongst us as council. But it is very important to point out that there is a space of committees that is council committee, which is really just us doing what we think is best in order for us to work, to operate at maximum capacity versus kind of statutory obligations, which is a different space. And that brings up things like, do you have to have minutes? Do you have to have a court reporter? Do you have to have, we've seen different levels of this, right? And those are ones that stand in a different space. That being the case, I'm going to kind of move us forward unless there's I don't want to belabor it to y'all. Moving on to discussing the timeline for reopening the Borough Building in the Yeagle Room. So this has been an ongoing conversation since the pandemic, right? Where we have looked at it, thought we were going to open it, cases went through the roof. That was in the summertime. We said for sure we'll be open the summer. Then we're like, we can't open the summer. We're right here again. We're talking about being open in January. Now here I am kind of masked up with a 95 mask and trying to keep things limited. And I've got to have mandatory tests for my kid to show up in school. So I leave it to you all to have this conversation. The one thing that I would say is that we're either open or not open. I don't believe the halfway in this space. So I know people are clamoring to kind of come, and I get all that. So I'll turn it over for discussion on when.
I'll start. I mean, I think several things. One is, as Jay said, when this thing hit us, we didn't have any of this system in place. So it had to be done very quickly. Several observations. One is that until this happened, we had maybe 3, 4, 5 people at a council meeting. So one of the things that I've learned is that when you provide an opportunity for more people to participate from home, it's been a wonderful way for us to interact with everybody at home. That's the first thing. Second thing is, in our council, 4 of our 7 members have close family members who are in the medical field or who are in science research, virology, and so on. So we felt that we were very well informed about the facts with respect to this virus. Some of us have grandchildren. Some of us now have young children. Where we are now with this latest strain is that there simply is not enough known about what the impact is going to be on young children who are not yet vaccinated. So as far as I'm concerned, we stay closed until we have more information about what all this means. If you, Brooke, if you came into this meeting without your mask and one of us was infected and was not symptomatic, and we sent that home to your child, I forgive myself. So that's where I am. We stay closed until we have more information. That's exactly what we've been doing, inching forward all along. If we'd opened up last summer like we were asked to, that would have turned into a mega infection event. So that's my 2 cents.
Other folks?
I think with the rise, especially recently, I say we stay close for now and discuss next month to see where cases are, and all those things. But right now, I don't think it is a good idea to open up.
Yeah, I agree with Valerie. If you just said that a month ago, I'd have been like, well, it looks like things are getting better. And now over the last couple of weeks, it looks like things are going back up again. So I think, like Valerie said, let's reassess in a month.
I agree with that as well. Reassess on a monthly basis with the understanding that we are really trying to meet the community, requests to reopen, but it is a very dangerous time and we don't want to expose anyone to something that could be different.
Any other comment?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I agree. I think that when we first heard about this 2 years ago now, certainly there was a lot of concern and there was a lot not known. But I'm not sure that the current, information supports that. Well, cases are rising. The hospitalizations continue to rise amongst those that aren't vaccinated. And, we're very fortunate that we have, vaccines that work well. And if you choose to be vaccinated and fully boosted, I think most of the research, and as Dr. Fauci has put it, you're in good hands and well protected. So, I think at this point, opening and allowing folks to make their own informed decisions, the public especially, is that opportunity, is the right thing to do. The other concern that I have is currently when people show up at the borough building unannounced or whatever else and start pounding on the door, it puts our staff in a position where they have to go out and possibly interact with those folks anyway. Whereas if the front door was open, they could serve those folks through the, the windows that we have set up in the borough building. So, I would be looking to maybe open at least that window service so that, folks can be helped that way, but we don't have to put the staff in a position where they're either sitting there while somebody's kind of pounding on the door or having to then walk out and then be closer to them than necessary.
Well, I would support Matt as far as opening up, as long as Alex is comfortable with that, because he works here and he's interfacing with the residents that come to the borough building, opening up that vestibule area, but not opening up a room for social events. I would like to just add that it's not just a matter of the unvaccinated. People who have vaccines are also still catching variants and are still experiencing sickness and issues related to this evolving virus. So, everyone needs to be as cautious as possible, regardless of what your status is, because you never know what the outcome may be.
Certainly, I'd just like to add an additional comment. I very much appreciate your comments, Brooke, but I guess for a further point of clarification, I think, for example, like our Jaeger room is there to be used, and there's community groups that, want to use that. They're currently meeting. They haven't stopped meeting. They're meeting. I imagine there's ways they can do it safely. I know with rapid testing becoming more available, for example, many folks, traveled for Christmas and took, everyone took rapid tests before they met. I don't see a reason that, a group such as the Stamp Club or somebody else that wanted to meet in the Yegel room and, they're making a choice in their own decision. But at the same time, there's risk in everything we do in life, including getting in a car and driving somewhere. So, at some point we need to let folks choose their level of risk. And, again, fortunately we have well-working vaccines to protect those that choose to take it.
I would just say a couple of things. One, in terms of the vaccine space, I continue to defer to the idea that there are those who can't get vaccinated and those who vaccination is not enough, right? So, if you are, severely immunocompromised, right, vaccination is not enough. The difficulty that I have in the conversation about opening up is that while I love public meetings more than anybody, right? Like I have sat in the front, during our biggest meetings that we could have during the fracking and during the deer, and done town halls and just come at me. Like I want to have the conversation. I'll do that, right? But what I don't want to do is do that and not know everybody's vaccination status. So now everybody's got to have a rapid test the day before they come, and everyone has to be fully tested and boosted, and then it becomes a logistic problem that I don't want to put onto our staff. That who's going to monitor to make sure that every person coming through has their vaccination card, their booster, and that they did a rapid test, right? Who's going to make sure that in the Jaeger room that it is wiped down and properly cleansed after every single meeting, right? So that the next group that comes in doesn't get affected by the group before that. One of the things that we're hearing about this particular variant, and again, these things keep changing, so I understand. Next month, we may be in a completely different space, right? But the thing that I found most concerning that makes me say, let's hold off, was the point when they said, so remember 6 feet and like 15 minutes, and and now that is not the case, right? The contagion level of this variant is far more contagious. And so I think the role of government, one of the primary roles, is the health and welfare of our citizenry. And so I know that there are people who are clamoring to come in and use the Jaeger room, right? I've got a neighbor down the street who asked me multiple times, when are you gonna do this? When are you gonna do this, right? In fact, I told you she is asking, even though I live on Garrick, for Diane's community, effectively the Blackridge community, right? They want access. But we have to do, I think, what is going to be in the best interest to the majority of folks. Not that your point is not well taken and that it's not a good point, because it is a good point. But I think that let's wait, take another look at it in February. I think come back to your point, Matt, see if we're in a slightly better space. And if we're in a better space, boom, right? But if we're in a worse space, or if it moves in another way, then we can hold on. So that would be where I'm at.
Jay, I would just like to add, I understand what you're saying, about, kind of the spreads more, but, you mentioned relying on, the doctors and the CDC and stuff, and the CDC did just change the guidelines from, 10 days of quarantine down to 5. So, I mean, they're obviously thinking that this is not quite the same as what we had before,
Yeah,
just
what-
as a point.
For clarity, it's 5 and 5 is what they did because they have workforce shortages, right? And so what it became is 5 days of quarantine and now 5 days, if you have a negative test to mask up the next 5 days. It first went 5 and 5, 5 days of quarantine, and then 5 days of nothing. Then they went 5 days of quarantine, 5 days of mask, and now they've got 5 days of quarantine followed by a negative test and 5 days of mask. We understand, and I think this is true of all of us, and why everybody's opinion on this discussion is valid, right? Like, I don't think anything that Brooke has said or Matt has said or Diana said, that any one of them are wrong, right? Because the truth is, if you knew exactly how this thing was going to behave, right, you'd be the most popular guy in the world, right? So, I would, and I think there's a majority of council on this to bring this to a bit of a close. Why don't we look to next month? We will definitely bring this back up next month. We'll bring it up every month, but I think particularly to Matt's point about bringing it up in serious earnest about reopening and see what the numbers and where we are. And I think I'm going to bring that conversation to close unless there's another objection.
Mr. President, just one comment.
Yes, sir.
Speaking for the Churchill Garden Club, I know a lot of our, we use the Jaeger room quite a bit, and we've continued to have social events outside the Jaeger room. I support, not opening it up until we're absolutely safe. We've been down at the Forest Hills Lodge, which is a little bit bigger. We did an activity with the Pittsburgh Glass people. They required every participant to show proof of vaccination. And like I said, who monitors that? Well, they monitor it right there. So if you weren't vaccinated, you weren't participating. But just on my personal opinion is I'd rather err on the safe side, because we will always have, time in the future to get together. Whereas if someone gets sick now, and unfortunately, we pass away from it, then we won't do that in the future again. So just to add that to the
Duly noted.
conversation.
And again, I think there's no wrong points on this particular discussion, right? Everybody's points are valid. Everyone's making very good, reasonable spaces and points to this. I'm going to close that discussion. I have one other thing I just want to bring up, and then unless there's anything else, we're going to jump into a really quick executive session, and then we'll adjourn after our executive session. My only really quick point was that the police kind of safety committee that we're going to need to meet this week. We do have a pressing issue with regard to the vaccination policy that was passed previously, and so we need to sit down and try and meet. There is a meeting right now scheduled. I don't know. Has it been confirmed? Okay. So we're looking at trying to have a meeting with kind of the bargaining unit effectively, maybe Wednesday, but let's try and sit down. Maybe we can do it by Zoom, so we don't have to kind of all run in here. So yeah, I know, right?
Technically, it's 1 p.m.
Right. So tentatively we've got a Wednesday 1. As the committee kind of stands, we find some time tomorrow. We can do that. So there was that. That's all I've got. Are other points? Other points by council? Okay, so let's move to adjourn. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'm going to go with Matt, man. He's always my second. So let's go.
Second.
Okay, so we're going to adjourn into an executive session, after which we'll formally adjourn the meeting itself.
So David, can you please stay on, and I will move other people out of the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's give it a couple seconds. So we'll get rid of the other people.